Alive Association Manager. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar presented by Jordania Reeves, and we're very grateful for her expertise today. I'm going to kick it over to Amy Pinger, who is on our programs committee, to take you through.
All right. Hello, everyone. We're so excited that you are joining us today. Just a couple housekeeping items. You are on mute. We will use the chat or QA section for comments. So feel free to just keep typing in there. We love to see that throughout the engagement today. Our session is being recorded, and we're going to put that on our live website for members. So if you are a member, you should be able to find that in just a few days. If you're not a member, we'd love for you to join us so we can help figure that out for you. A few announcements. We are still looking for our executive director. So we are hiring. This is a new position within the organization. We're very excited about it. And then today is the final day to submit your application to join the Alive board next year. So just a personal note, this was something that I thought about for a long time and then finally made that jump, and it has been incredibly rewarding both personally and professionally. So I would strongly recommend it if you are teetering on that. Our September Live Academy will be building generational communication gaps in the nonprofit world. And that's going to be on a Monday, September 23rd. And then, as you probably know, we do not have one in October because we have the hybrid conference. So we'll be right back again in November. And we have an entire panel presenting. Is everybody welcome? So two really exciting things coming up. In October, as I said, we have the hybrid conference, which is October 22nd or 23rd, depending on your location. We do have our presenters and their bios up on the website, so you can see that, learn more about them. And now it is time for me to turn it over to Jordania Reeves. She is an Alive board member, and she's the Vice President of Programs, which Alive Academies are one of the programs that we do here at Alive. So Jordania, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to hand it over to you to take it over.
Thank you. I'll get my screen up here. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and chat with you today. Again, my name is Jordania Reeves. I'm a certified volunteer administrator, CVA, and I've been working in volunteer engagement space for over 15 years. I've worked at a variety of organizations in the nonprofit world and have most recently moved to the corporate volunteer space. Now I work with a skilled corporate volunteer program called TD Mindpower Analytics for Social Good with TD Bank. Throughout my time in these different spaces, one common theme has come across the industry, and that is metrics. How we measure our volunteers, our work, our performance, and the impact of our programs. So today I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks on how you can engage and enhance your volunteer metrics to move beyond counting just headcount and hours for your program. So I'm going to start off with just a quick poll. If you want to use the chat feature, there's a little smiley face there with reactions. And if you want to just use the clapping emoji, if you only have used headcount and hours for your metrics, you can use the little heart emoji to say, I don't count volunteers or their hours, or you can use the little celebration emoji, which I gotta go scroll down here and find that one, to say, oh man, where is it buried in here? I'm gonna search for it. So some of you found the celebration emoji to say, I count volunteers and hours, but also other metrics. Okay, so we have kind of a variety here. Some people only use your head count and hours. Some people are using both. Oh, I like the smiley face with a little a little different. Yeah, I couldn't find celebrate either. So, okay, so quite a few people using both as well. Yeah, I think this smiley face celebration works just as well. Um, so great. Anyone else want to jump in and just say, yes, I'm only counting the head count in hours, or I don't count head count or hours, or I'm using both. All right, okay. Quite a few celebrates, a few hand claps. Do I see any hearts so far? I don't think you guys see any hearts. Okay. All right, great. Well, that kind of gives me an idea of where we're starting with. So in this session, we're going to look at how you can diversify your tracking metrics. We'll talk about doing an impact assessment, then we'll share how you can inform your engagement strategy, and then we'll wrap up with some key takeaways to make it happen. So as I jump in, I just want to share a quote that I first heard from Susan Carter Kale. She shared this quote in a presentation she was giving, and it just really stuck with me. In fairy tales, when we count or price something, it loses its magic. This really stuck with me because so much of our work can become mundane and routine, and it's so easy to become stuck in the ways that we have measured our volunteer program. So today I challenge you to think about how you can recapture the magic of your volunteers. So beyond the basics of headcount and hours, let's talk about measures that we can take to diversify your metrics. By incorporating new metrics, your organization can gain insights into the overall volunteer experience and identify areas for improvement. So what can you track? When you track hours, when you track the hours you put in at work, does that truly measure your effort? I can tell you personally, the early hours of my day are worth far more than the afternoon. By 12 o'clock, I'm hungry. My ADHD has drawn me into 10 different directions. And since I've been working from home, I'm probably folding laundry. In your experiences, does a volunteer with only 1 hour to give show less effort and accomplish less than someone with 5 hours to give? Possibly, but not always. By only measuring the hours someone gave, are we really reflecting the effort? If we were looking to diversify our metrics, here's some examples of things that you can track. Your volunteer satisfaction level, skills that volunteers have developed while serving with you, your retention rates, how many volunteers are staying with your program, and then the tangible value to your organization. So let's talk about some of these metrics. Having data represented visually can be very impactful. Throughout the presentation today, you'll have lots of examples of visuals from data that you can use as inspiration for your own metrics. You can use a picture graph, which is one of my favorite ways of showing data. This visual shows us how many volunteers are sticking around with your organization and how many are one-time volunteers. Depending on your program, this may be a good metric to track. With employee retention, it is more expensive to train someone new than it is to keep someone. It's the same with volunteers. After the time and effort to recruit, onboard, train, generally it's better if they just stay with us. This metric can also provide other insight. Maybe volunteers are not returning. Why is that? You can also expand this metric to show volunteer retention by area or by program or by demographic. Are volunteers sticking around in your food sorting program, but not in your food distribution? Why is that? Another metric you can use is a Net Promoter Score. This is a great way to measure how satisfied your volunteers are with their experience. The Net Promoter Score measures the likelihood of volunteers recommending your organization to others. It is calculated by subtracting the percent of detractors from the percent of promoters. Promoters are volunteers who rate your organization highly, while detractors rate it poorly. It is an effective tool for understanding your organization or brand strength and benchmarking across the industry and improving experiences. On a 10-point scale, scores from 1 to 6 are detractors. Scores from 7 to 8 are passives, and 9 and 10s are promoters. A score of 60 to 70 is good, and a score of 70 plus is excellent. You can also track this year over year to discover trends. As you think about all the ways that you can track, remember that the heart of a volunteer is never measured in size, but by the depth of the commitment to make a difference in others' lives. So next, let's talk about impact assessment. You know that demonstrating the impact of volunteers is critical both internally for your organization and externally for the community you serve. So let's discuss methods for measuring the outcomes of your volunteer program. So what are some ways you can measure the impact of your volunteers? Well, the number of beneficiaries you've reached, the cost savings that have been generated, the community impact created. These metrics can showcase the tangible benefits of volunteers' contribution. These are great ways to assess the impact your volunteers are having. So let's look at some more visuals with this data. This stacked rows visual shows you how volunteers are serving based on the program. This chart can help you tell the story of who your volunteers are impacting in a program. So for instance, through this, you may have, this information came from a homeless shelter that I worked with, and we had 3 major programs that volunteers could help out with: meal service, helping in our food pantry, and helping with a sack lunch program. From this information, we could see that 600 residents were served in our meal service program, 200 residents were served, or 200 community members were served in our food pantry, and our sack lunch program served 400 residents and 150 community members. So through this, we can see how many members and those that are receiving service from your organization were impacted in each of these programs. Many organizations also want to track the dollar value of the volunteer program. If you don't have a pay-to-play model, sometimes these can be hard to track. You may have to think outside of the box on this one. There is a metric that comes out each year from the independent sector with the Do Good Institute. And according to them, the current estimated national value of each volunteer hour is $33.49. In reading through their report and how they come up with this number and how they say it should be used, I found that it doesn't usually apply to the majority of the volunteers that I have serving. Even now in the corporate space, that number isn't really accurate for the work that my volunteers are doing. So I prefer to use values that I can calculate, like this example. So again, at the homeless shelter I worked for, volunteers made sack lunches that we then gave out to those who weren't going to be in the shelter for a hot meal that day. Our cost with supplies and paid staff to make these sack lunches was $3.10. These included 2 sandwiches, 1 piece of fruit, 1 snack, the brown bag to put it in, and the staff labor to assemble those lunches. We also handed out 600 of these lunches every single day. So from this, That year, my volunteers from churches, from schools, from sports teams and corporations purchased their own supplies, set up an assembly line to produce these lunches in their own space, and donated 35,456 lunches that year. Due to volunteers, our organization saved over $100,000 and provided a third of the total lunches that our organization gave out. These are real metrics. So being able to really take a look at what my volunteers were doing and the real tangible dollar value that they were providing to my organization, I was really able to advocate for my program using these metrics. So building a sustainable volunteer program requires ongoing evaluation and adaptation. So let's explore how tracking metrics can inform strategic decision making and foster long-term engagement for your organization. Now that we've looked at how diversifying your metric, assessing impact, and visually representing the data you collected, what can these numbers really tell you? If your volunteer survey shows you that volunteers have a more positive experience with one trained staff member over another, you might be able to make the case for formalizing how you do staff training. If you have calculated the cost to recruit a new volunteer, you know that investing in retention pays. And most metrics will tell you that a volunteer contribution is far more than just time. So let's look at some more visuals. You can use this progress dial to show what factors influence the retention of your volunteers. Knowing that volunteer recognition, proper training, and volunteers who are recruited by their peers have a positive influence on your retention, this can help you build your retention strategy around those influences. Also, knowing that things that negatively affect your retention can help you build your strategy. Things like a lack of funding for your volunteer program, staff indifference towards volunteers, micromanaging of your volunteers can all negatively affect your retention rates. So you can devise strategies to address that. If you see that staff indifference towards volunteers is negatively influencing the retention of your volunteers, then maybe creating a formalized staff training program is a course forward, is a good strategic item that you can put into place. If you see that you recognition for your volunteers has a really positive impact, but you don't have any funding for your volunteer program in order to recognize volunteers and keep them around and increase your retention of volunteers, then maybe you can make a case to your leadership that based on the data you've collected, these things are having a negative influence. And if we can work on getting a bit more budget for recognizing our volunteers, it'll have a more positive impact and we'll be able to keep more volunteers. If you're seeing that volunteers being recruited by their peers has a very positive impact on them continuing with your program and retaining them as a volunteer, then maybe you can create a strategic training program for those long-term volunteers who you have who are really committed to your organization, to train them and teach them how they can recruit folks around them and in their lives, or strategically recruit for more volunteers for your program. But having this information can help you to make better decisions and make a plan for the work that you do in your program. So when you're evaluating your program, it's important to ask questions. These will help you to use the information that you have to determine the best course forward. In this graph, we have volunteers who participated by their age. And you can see what percentage of volunteers are represented in each age group. So we can ask questions from this graph, like why is our 12 to 21-year-olds the largest group? What barriers are there in place for the 36 to 50 group? This is our largest giving demographic. So maybe we can look at ways that we can work to grow this particular demographic. Are there other ways that you can engage seniors at this level? Are there other barriers that are keeping seniors from volunteering in your program? Now, all that being said, you may have a program that best accommodates the timing and the scheduling for this 12 to 21-year-old group, and your program isn't really appropriate for this seniors group, and that's okay. Not every piece of data is going to give you kind of these strategic insights, and you may not want to grow each area or have an equal number from each area, but visualizing this data and collecting that and getting an idea of what demographics are represented in your organization and what is the story that is being told, will give you a better idea of how you can move forward and make a better impact on your organization. And if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as we go along. We'll have a big space here for discussion, and we can talk through those together. So how you visualize your data also matters. These two charts use the same data set, but give you very different information. Maybe I want to make a case for targeting more students because they get more work done overall. With the graph here on the left, I can see which percentage of my volunteers come from each classification. With the graph on the right, I can see what a breakdown of my students and what school they came from. And then I can ask, why do I have more students from Pebble Hills High School than I have from Eastlake High School? I know that there's a club from Pebble Hills High School that requires hours for their students to volunteer. So I can then ask, does Eastlake High School have a similar club that I can target? That maybe I just haven't talked to the students or haven't looked into the school to see if that's a possibility. So if I want to grow this student base, this graph really gives me a little bit more detailed information, and based on my knowledge of my volunteers, I'm able to really dive into this a little bit more. Same thing can be said if I look at my groups. I know that corporations take a lot of time and effort, as well as churches, to coordinate them, to onboard them, to train them for the work that they do. However, corporations, a lot of the corporations that I work with give my organization dollars for the hours they serve. There's a lot of really great programs that do that, and the ones I'm targeting are doing that. So even though I have 500 volunteers coming from corporations and I have 300 volunteers coming from churches, I'm spending the same amount of effort to get both of those groups into my organization. If I focus my effort a little bit more on corporations, then I'm kind of getting a double bang for my buck. I'm still getting the volunteers that I need to complete my programming, but they're also coming with dollars for the organization, which can be a help. So maybe this next year, I'm going to focus more on recruiting corporations and finding more of those corporations that give those dollars per hour, because my time and effort in recruiting them is going to be better spent overall for the organization in doing that. That's not to say that I want to lose any of my churches, but I'm just going to spend more of my time recruiting those corporations. And I'm able to kind of see this through these visuals. I will say all of the visuals that I put together today and my presentation was built in Canva. All of the programs that I've used, Canva included, but PowerPoint, Google Slides, they all have some really cool visualizations that you can use that are kind of incorporated in their program. So depending on what kind of use you have, I know this fun one that kind of zooms in and zooms out. That's a Canva product. So I highly encourage you to use Canva because I use it for everything. But there are also other great visualizations that you can use in other programs. So let's say that I want to grow my corporate volunteers and my students based on this information. So now I can look at that data year over year and see that strategically targeting students at Eastlake High School in 2022, I was able to grow that group and actually make my student group the largest group that even surpassed my corporate school church groups. So now that's my largest group of volunteers with 950 volunteers versus the 600 I had the year prior. You can also see that I have a little bit more balance on the 4 schools that I'm targeting because I have 250 coming from Pebble Hills High School, which is what I had the year before. Those are great volunteers and they're really consistent in their program. But I've also been able to grow my Eastlake High School volunteers because I discovered they do have a similar program. I was able to go in and talk to the principal. I was able to get in front of some students and recruit a lot more students from that program. I also know that these students give more hours than a lot of the other groups that I work with consistently. And they also, when they're there working, if they come for an hour, they get a lot more done in that hour than some of my other corporate groups or my community service workers or things like that. So they're accomplishing a lot more in the time that they're there with me. So that's why I strategically wanted to work on recruiting those individuals. Same kind of thing with corporations. Because I focused more of my time with my corporations, I actually have a smaller group of that are coming from this group. We went from 1,200 down to 900, but you can see that my corporations grew significantly. So that has, even though it's a smaller number of volunteers coming in the door, it's still having a greater impact on my organization because it means more funding that's coming in through the volunteers. So being able to visualize my data in this kind of way shows the improvement that my strategic plan made year over year, and strategically targeting those groups, I was able to improve in that way. So I'd like to share another one of my favorite quotes with you. Statistics are used like a drunk uses a light post or a lamp post for support, not illumination. Remember the example that I gave you for the sack lunches that generated $100,000 in cost saving for my organization? Like I said, that was a real metric. And by tracking those metrics, I was able to make the case for increasing my staff by 1 person to manage this expanding program. If I had just taken in our sack lunches and not talked to our chef in our homeless program and gotten a cost breakdown for the sack lunches that he was putting together in the kitchen there, if I had not seen that that was a volunteer opportunity for us to leverage. Um, in this particular program, I had volunteers who were coming and serving meals, which was fantastic. It was a great volunteer experience. The residents who were receiving those meals really felt cared about and appreciated. So it was a great program, but I was filling up my dates with volunteers, which is a wonderful problem to have, but I had opportunities for more people to be engaged as a volunteer and hear about the work of our organization because I expanded this off-site volunteer project in making these sack lunches outside of our facility. And then being able to really break down the cost savings that this was creating for our organization because we didn't have to buy thousands and thousands of pieces of bread. Uh, our organization was spending $50,000 a year in bread just for this program. So having volunteers who could do the fundraising, buy the supplies themselves, and do that really, really created a great impact to our organization, not only for the volunteers having a better experience and being able to be engaged in different ways, but also me being able to hire another staff to manage the work of that program. And I will also share with you that through that sack lunch program, I actually did make it in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most number of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches made in 1 hour because I had over 1,000 volunteers from a sandwich making restaurant chain in Dallas, Texas called Witch, and they had an initiative with their organization to for every sandwich that they sold, they wanted to give a sandwich back. So they held their headquarters was in Dallas, and they held their yearly conference in Dallas. And I partnered with them to have this sandwich making party at their corporate conference. And it just kind of steamrolled into them wanting to make a whole bunch of sandwiches. So I don't remember the number exactly off the top of my head, but I want to say it was about 65,000 sandwiches made in 1 hour by over 1,000 volunteers. And they invited the Guinness Book of World Records record keeper people there. They videoed the whole thing. And we gave out peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to after school programs, to my shelter program, to other shelter programs across the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and impacted over 200 organizations with sandwich donations on that day. So you never really know what kind of just tracking my volunteers and finding creative ways to engage volunteers could actually end you up in the Book of World Records. Now, I will say that record has since been broken. That was probably in 2015, I think. So I'm no longer in the book, but I was for 2015. So I love being able to use statistics to really illuminate the work that you're doing and help you plan better for the future. So at the beginning of the session, I challenge you to think about how you can recapture the magic of your volunteers. So let's talk about how you can make that happen. So here are some tips on collecting and organizing data for being able to make these visuals and present this information, including these in your strategic planning, including these in your yearly reports or your monthly reports, however you're doing that. Being able to collect and organize your data is really, really important. And I will say, over my last 2 years working with TD Mindpower Analytics for Social Good, I have learned so much more about the importance of these large data sets that we're gathering and how to organize them in a way that you can really, really utilize that and analyze that information that you have coming in. So firstly, you're going to want to define your objectives. What makes the most sense for your organization and your program? So this step is going to help you gather information on how to achieve your objectives, which can help direct your work and evaluate the systems that you have in place. So finding out what information you want to collect, and maybe some of the statistics I showed you today or the visuals I showed you today can help kind of inspire different things you might want to track. But really thinking about what is going to help you tell the story for your program or for your organization and the impact that volunteers are going to have. And then you want to choose your collection method. The process of collecting data can be challenging, but it can also inform decision making and increase your organization's impact. So how are you going to find the information that you need? If you are calculating a net promoter score for your volunteers, that might mean a survey that you're putting together and giving out at the end of every volunteer interaction, they complete this survey. Maybe it's a yearly survey that you're sending out to volunteers. If you are collecting information on how your volunteers are, if you're doing maybe a sandwich project, you're counting the number of sandwiches that are coming in. Well, who's doing those counts? Who's giving you that information? For me, it was one particular staff member collected the sandwiches in our kitchen, and every day they gave me a number of sandwiches that came in that day. And I was able to keep that in a spreadsheet and use that information when I was doing my reporting. So it may come from different areas. It may be your volunteer system that you already have that's tracking the number of volunteers and your number of hours. That might be where you're collecting that data. But choosing the method that you use to find the information that you need is going to be an important process. And then you want to organize your data in a way that facilitates analysis and decision making. And it can be done using tools and techniques like spreadsheets, databases, charts, graphs, tables, dashboards, how you organize your data to be able to tell the story with the information that you've collected. So here's some best practices when you're organizing your data. Establish a naming convention. Use a precise and dependable file name that are short and descriptive. If you use dates, stick with a consistent format. If you're managing consistent file versioning instead of overriding and updating a file or outdating a file, you can just create a new one and revise the name. When you are creating a data library, it helps to have standardized categories and define their function so that stakeholders can easily identify and pull out the data sets that they need or that you need when you're putting this information together. So standardizing that practice is really important. And I can provide these steps for you as well. So I've given you a lot of information, but let's talk about it. We have is about 20 minutes. Is that right, Amy? Left?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna have Gretchen put a document in the chat. This is a worksheet for you that basically is just an expanded version of what we have here on the slide. that you can go through yourself or with your team. And it's just reflections on this worksheet or this workshop and what kind of key takeaways that you have. But I want to spend some time, since we have a little bit of time now, to kind of talk through these pieces and what you've kind of gone through. We can kind of address some of the questions that came up, and see if there are if there's any current data that you're using or future data that you've thought about collecting now. If there's any key takeaways that you've gotten from this presentation. Did you get any new ideas? Are there any important goals that you hope to achieve? So you can add your insights into the chat. And I should have asked this ahead of time, Amy, but I think they can raise their hand and we can bring them off mute. Is that right?
Yep, they sure can.
Okay, fantastic. So if you want to come off mute and ask your question, you're welcome to just raise your hand and we'll bring you on. Or you can put your answer in the chat or your question in the chat. So maybe I know we had some other questions that came in first. Maybe we could talk through those and then see if anyone wants to come off of mute.
I've got one from Kate McPherson, and she says, how do you gather this data related to retention? Do you have a solid survey that has worked well?
I do have a solid survey. I kind of have the benefit for my organization currently. We have what we call a pulse survey that actually goes out to, so for me right now, all of my volunteers come internally from TD Bank. So they're all internal employees who work here. And then they go out and volunteer to other organizations. But we have what we call a pulse survey that has a list of 20, 30 questions on it that gets sent out to all of the bank employees every year, the same time every year, to kind of get the pulse of the organization, see how things are going. But from that survey, we've identified 3 questions from that survey that are kind of my volunteer retention questions. And I get that data sent back to me once a year, and I'm able to look through and see, okay, the volunteers who answered these questions are still volunteering. They were volunteering in 2022, now they're volunteering in 2023, and their answers are consistent for these ones. So that we do a yearly pulse check survey that's worked really well. So that's one way that we've used kind of for retention purposes. Other things that I've used in the past is a volunteer exit survey when they're leaving the program, or when they finish up with their volunteer activity, they get an email that has a response survey. That's worked really well. I've also looked at just my data in general from my volunteers. If I have Sam who volunteered in 2022, and I see in 2023 he's back, or Sam who volunteered in January, he's back in February. I'm able to kind of track those things as well to show that he's coming back year over year. The little the visual that with the dials that I showed you all, that was information from actually another presentation that I had gone to, that they had tracked the retention rates and what was influencing volunteers. But you could do the same kind of thing by asking why do you continue volunteering with us? What things are important to you? Who recruited you to volunteer? Was it a staff member? Did you hear about us on the radio, on a commercial? Did your peer recruit you? Just kind of those things. So it was a combination of a lot of data that they put together to come up with those metrics and those influences for retention. So I hope that kind of answers your question. There's multiple ways that you can do that. Was there other questions that came through, Gretchen?
Yeah, someone wanted to know what are the 3 questions?
Um, you're putting me on the spot here. I believe it's how important is um, TD Bank's work in the community to you? Um, have you been given the opportunity to volunteer within the organization? And I don't remember what the third one is, but they're all kind of around like community impact and that type of thing.
Hey, another question from Tara. And she said, is this for end of year reporting and future planning?
Yes and no. I've used this for I would say absolutely yes for future planning. But it doesn't necessarily just have to be your yearly report. One of the things that I did when I was at a food bank, and we had a very involved board that had a lot of folks who really wanted to see data and metrics and kind of they called it a scorecard for our program to see how the volunteers were impacting our food bank. And so they had a monthly meeting, and I put together a scorecard page with these metrics and these visuals to show on a monthly basis how things were going with the volunteer program. So you can use them a variety of ways. It doesn't necessarily just have to be for your end of year report. You can use it more often than that, or less often, however makes sense for your organization.
Thank you. All right. Kate asks, how might we measure health indicators? For example, sense of belonging, civic agency, etc.
Surveys are a great way to do this. Really asking your volunteers in a survey how they're feeling about the work that they're doing is a great way to measure that. If you're creating a visual for those type of things, you can show increases year over year. You can use like a bar graph to show that. You can, I think there's a variety of ways that you can visualize that data, but probably collecting it, a survey would probably be the best format to do that in.
All right, thank you. Okay, Amanda says, I've used Canva a lot and love it. I didn't realize there were intergraphic graphics and that if you put them in a PowerPoint, you can hover and interact with the graphic and have them share numbers. Can you share the name of that tool on Canva or what type of graphic you use? So cool. I agree.
Absolutely. It's a newer feature, I think, in the last 2 releases. I'm totally a Canva nerd, and I mean, Gretchen can attest to this. I use it for everything. Um, so I also watch all of their presentations when they have a new release for things. They'll usually have like an hour-long like webinar each year to say these are all the new features that we just released, and I watch all of those because I'm obsessed. So there is a free version of Canva that you can use. You can also get Canva Pro for nonprofits, and I think this feature is a Canva Pro feature, but if you work for a nonprofit organization, then you can apply. It's a pretty easy process to apply. And I haven't heard of anybody getting like denied from that if they're a nonprofit, but you can get that pro account for free for nonprofits. Um, for specifics, it's in the elements area where all of the other graphs are at, like graphs and charts inside of elements. And then there's, I think towards the bottom, I want to say that it's called interactive graphs, but I'd have to look that up. But if you just kind of click through and play with all the graphs on there, you'll find the ones that can interact. There's the one with kind of the bubbles, and there's a couple other versions of that same kind of thing that will let you like zoom in and zoom out, that sort of thing.
Hey, we've got a request from Mackenzie. She's going to ask a question. So Mackenzie, I've unmuted you. Go ahead, please.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, friends. I became a volunteer coordinator and new into the role in general, but for my organization, it's the first volunteer coordinator that they have full time in the 28 years we have been providing um, support to our mission. So, with that being said, I have a lot of gaps with the data I have. I came into it and I've spent the past 6 months really just restabilizing it to even begin building a foundation. So my engagement's pretty limited as far as with the software we're using right now. It's not very in depth. We're switching to better impact. However, I don't have like birthdays for volunteers that have been, volunteering for the past 6+ years. Little data, important data like that I can't even get them to show interest with surveys I send out. So I'm kind of having a that weird growth period and transition period of, okay, we have my game plan, I have a strategic plan, but the gap of, okay, these volunteers have been kind of feral, I suppose.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They haven't had they haven't had the support that is needed, and so I'm really excited to come in, but I don't know where to begin as far as even the simple data and getting them to show interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Surveys can be hard. Um, I will say, I have since learned that a successful survey is actually a lot less participants than you might think. So if you're sending a survey to 100 people, you want a 10% response rate is what you're looking for. So only 10 people actually to get like valuable data about your group. You really only need 10% representation. That's like the industry standard. I didn't really know that up until a couple years ago. So I was really discouraged by the number of responses I was getting from surveys. So I'll just say that first. But I also feel your pain about coming into a program with no data or very limited data or very gapish data. Definitely understand that. One thing I would recommend, especially since you're switching over to a new system, is have your volunteers do a new volunteer application. That's one thing that's worked really successfully for me, just communicating, hey, we're really excited to launch this new program. It's going to mean a new volunteer application so we can update everyone's information and really know what's going on with our programs. Just being really transparent with your volunteers about like why we're getting this new application and that it's a really good thing and it's going to be really helpful for your program and it's going to make you be able to tell the story of what your volunteers are doing, and then just ask them to redo their application. Usually volunteer applications don't take that long to complete. It's like a 5-minute thing, and you probably won't get everyone to do it. But if you spend a little time, every time you see Doug come into the facility and he still hasn't filled out his volunteer application, you can say, hey, Doug, can you step in my office for 5 minutes? We'll fill this out together. Things like that to just kind of track down those defiant feral volunteers might be helpful, but especially with your new app, just having them do a new application, then it's not gonna give you that historical data for a lot of it, but it'll give you more solid data going forward for your program. And you can, when you set that up with Better Impact, you can put fields that are required, and you kind of have a great opportunity to think about the things right now that you want to track and might want to know in the future, like the birthdays for your volunteers. And you can make those required fields. So you really are collecting that data that you need for your future development. Did that help?
I think so. She says yes. So we now have a
Okay,
question from
great.
Kate. So I'm going to unmute you, Kate. Go ahead. Kate McPherson.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
You are,
Go
Kate.
ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
okay, thanks. Yeah, so I really appreciated your graphic where you talked about the sort of financial benefits for the sandwich, the lunch program. Is
Mhm.
there any good maybe some, and I appreciate like a food bank or a shelter where there's a more comprehensive sort of gathering of the actual financial benefits of having a volunteer program, because you're right, people who volunteer often donate, money, they do other things. I'm trying to see if there's some way that some organizations can argue for the position that they don't currently have for a volunteer coordinator by being able to show that kind of evidence.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you two things. First of all, Alive, if you go to the Alive website and you look at the standards for strategic volunteer engagement, Alive has put together a really comprehensive document, and it also has an evaluation sheet that you can do with your organization to see where you are. Thank you, Gretchen. It's under the resource tab. Where your organization is strategically in how you engage volunteers. And if you are really meeting all of the standards that are set up for the industry across the way. So I encourage you to take a look at that, because that has some really good kind of evaluations of how your program is doing. And it also has information on how you can use that information to then make your case for more involvement, more engagement, more finances for your program, increasing your headcount. It has those resources kind of built into there so you can help make your case. So definitely take a look at that. And I believe there's a recording on there as well that you can use to kind of look through that we go into it a little bit more on the recording. So I encourage you to look at that. I will also say, I don't know that there is a comprehensive list of things that you can track, but I can say things like if you have a fundraising department that's tracking the donations that are coming in, can they give you a list of the donors? And can you run that against your volunteer list to see, okay, X number of my volunteers donated and they donated this dollar amount. Kind of collecting data from various sources. Like I said, I had to go talk to our kitchen manager to find out how much he spent on buying this item and buying this item. And I kind of had to get creative and do the math, because there wasn't a great source for that readily available, but being able to pull different pieces. Also, the food bank that I worked at, one of the metrics we tracked, we had a food delivery program, and it would cost us so many dollars in gas and paying a staff member to go deliver this food out to people, but having a volunteer do it who donated their gas, we were able to save so many dollars through that. So it's kind of just thinking through the programs that you have in place and what those cost your organization, and if a volunteer can do that and eliminate that cost for your organization.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question, I think, from Rive. So please go ahead. And that will
Hi guys. Thank
Oh,
you so much. Just wanting to share too, just an idea that I don't know who asked the question. I think, who was it? I can't see who it was, but depending on how many volunteers you're trying to update their account, maybe you could have a volunteer make phone calls to ask those questions and be like a touch point to capture that information and make the changes in your system. And then from that, you can have them ask other questions. That might be an idea too.
Absolutely. That's a great idea, Reve. Thank you so much. Okay. So just a couple of things, key takeaways: track information about your volunteers and evaluate the work that they're doing so you know how to tell your story. So last thing I'll leave you with, everything that can be counted does not necessarily count, and everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. One of my favorite data quotes. So thank you so much for letting me present today. Feel free to reach out to me, contact me on LinkedIn. Here's my email. I love talking about data and all things volunteer engagement. So please feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordania. We have put the link for our academy in the webinar chat. I'll go ahead and put it in there one more time. If you have just a second to take that, we'd appreciate that. We always love getting feedback to inform where we go next. Again, if you are not a member of Alive, we'd love to talk to you about joining. We do have individual, agency, or pay what you can memberships available. Lots of updates on our website, which is volunteeralive.org. So thank you all, and we hope to see you next month.